Welcome back to the Unpacking BPD Podcast, where we explore the depths of borderline personality disorder, one layer at a time. I'm your host, Sebastian Hayes. In today's episode, we're diving into one of the most powerful and emotionally charged experiences of BPD, the fear of abandonment. This fear isn't just a fleeting worry or a passing thought. For many people with BPD, it feels like a deep, all-consuming panic that shapes how you navigate relationships, how you react to even small changes in those relationships, and how you view yourself. To truly understand this fear, we have to go beyond the surface. It's not just about not wanting to be alone, it's about what abandonment means to someone with BPD. For many, it's tied to a sense of survival. An unconscious belief that if someone leaves, you might not be able to handle the pain, or worse, that you'll lose a part of yourself in the process. Let's start with what this fear feels like in the moment. Imagine this scenario. You've made plans with your best friend for lunch. You've been looking forward to it all week, maybe even counting on it as a way to feel connected after a tough few days. But an hour before you're supposed to meet, they send a text saying they have to cancel. For most people, this might feel disappointing or inconvenient. But for someone with BPD, it can feel catastrophic. Your mind might start racing with thoughts like, are they mad at me? Did I do something wrong? Or worse, do they even care about me anymore? That fear quickly spirals into feelings of rejection, sadness, or even anger. It's not just about the canceled plans, it's about what those plans represented: safety, connection, and reassurance that you're not alone. This fear doesn't just live in your mind, it takes over your body. You might feel your chest tighten, your stomach drop, or your heart start to race. For some, it feels like the walls are closing in or like you're drowning in a wave of panic that you can't escape. This isn't an overreaction or an attempt to get attention. It's a deeply ingrained survival response, often tied to past experiences where love or care felt unpredictable or conditional. When this fear takes hold, it can lead to behaviors that feel impossible to control in the moment. For some people, the instinct is to cling tightly to the person they're afraid of losing. This might look like sending multiple texts, asking for constant reassurance, or going out of your way to please them, even at the expense of your own needs. Let's say your partner hasn't responded to your texts all day. The fear of abandonment might lead you to send message after message, asking if they're okay, if they're upset with you, or if they still care. While this behavior comes from a place of wanting connection, it can sometimes overwhelm the other person, creating tension in the relationship. For others, the fear of abandonment shows up as pushing people away before they have a chance to leave. You might find yourself thinking, if I end this first, it won't hurt as much when they eventually walk away. This could mean starting a fight over something small, pulling back emotionally, or even cutting someone off entirely. It's a way of trying to protect yourself from the pain of loss, but it often leaves you feeling more isolated and disconnected in the long run. What's important to understand is that both of these responses, clinging and pushing away, come from the same place: a desire to avoid the unbearable pain of feeling abandoned. But here's where it gets tricky. These behaviors, while meant to protect you, can sometimes create the very outcomes you fear most. When you cling too tightly, it can push people away. And when you push people away, it can confirm your belief that no one ever stays. This cycle is exhausting, not just for the people around you, but for you as well. It can leave you feeling stuck, constantly questioning your worth and whether you're truly deserving of love and care. To understand why this fear runs so deep, we need to look at where it comes from. For many people with BPD, the fear of abandonment isn't just about the present moment. It's a reflection of past experiences, especially in childhood. Imagine growing up in an environment where love felt inconsistent or unpredictable. Maybe you had a caregiver who was physically present but emotionally distant, or one whose affection seemed to come with strings attached. In that kind of environment, your brain learns to associate closeness with risk. You might grow up believing that love is something you have to earn, or that people will only stick around if you're good enough. Fast forward to adulthood, and those beliefs don't just go away. They shape how you view relationships, how you interpret other people's actions, and how you respond to even small signs of distance or change. When someone cancels plans or seems distracted, your brain doesn't think, "Oh, they're just busy." It thinks this is the beginning of the end, and that fear can feel so real, so immediate, that it's hard to see it for what it is, a pattern rooted in the past, not the present. But here's the thing. Just because this fear is deeply ingrained doesn't mean it's permanent. The first step to managing it is understanding it. Not just where it comes from, but how it shows up in your life and the impact it has on your relationships. Now that we've explored what the fear of abandonment feels like and where it often comes from, let's talk about how it impacts your day-to-day life and, most importantly, how to start managing it. One of the biggest ways this fear affects people is in relationships, whether they're romantic, platonic, or even professional. Think about how exhausting it can be to constantly question if someone cares about you or if they're going to leave. Maybe you've found yourself analyzing every text message, every change in someone's tone, or every time they seem distracted. A friend says, "I'll call you later," and you wonder if they mean it. A coworker forgets to include you on an email, and you spiral into thoughts that they're mad at you or trying to push you out. These thoughts aren't random. They're tied to that deep fear that rejection or abandonment is just around the corner. And the problem is, these thoughts can feel so convincing. Your brain starts connecting dots that might not even exist, turning a small misunderstanding into proof that someone is pulling away. When these fears take over, it's easy to feel like you're walking on eggshells in your relationships. You might avoid bringing up issues because you're afraid it will push someone away. Or you might overcompensate by being overly accommodating, always putting the other person's needs ahead of your own. While this might feel like a way to protect the relationship, it can leave you feeling resentful, invisible, or even more disconnected. On the flip side, some people with BPD respond to this fear by creating distance themselves. Maybe you've found yourself thinking, "If I don't let anyone get too close, then I won't have to deal with the pain of losing them." You might avoid opening up emotionally, keep relationships superficial, or even end connections preemptively when they start to feel too vulnerable. Both of these patterns, over-accommodating and withdrawing, can make it hard to build relationships that feel safe and fulfilling. They create a push-pull dynamic where you're constantly caught between wanting closeness and fearing it at the same time. And this dynamic doesn't just affect your relationships with others, it affects your relationship with yourself. When you're constantly afraid of being abandoned, it can start to feel like you're not worthy of love or care. You might find yourself thinking, "What's wrong with me? Why can't I keep people in my life?" These thoughts can feed into a cycle of shame, self-blame, and emotional exhaustion. But here's what I want you to know. This fear, while intense and deeply ingrained, is something you can learn to manage. It won't disappear overnight, but with time, effort, and the right tools, you can start to break free from its grip. Let's start with self-awareness. When the fear of abandonment starts to creep in, pause and ask yourself, what's triggering this fear? Is it something that's actually happening, or is it a story my mind is creating? For example, if a friend cancels plans, try to separate the action. They canceled because they're busy, from the fear. They canceled because they don't care about me. Naming what's real versus what's fear-driven can help you create some distance from the emotion. Next, focus on grounding yourself in the present moment. When the fear feels overwhelming, try using grounding techniques to bring your attention back to the here and now. You might focus on your breath. Notice 5 things you can see or hear around you. Or hold on to something tangible like a piece of jewelry or a stress ball. These small actions can help calm your nervous system and remind you that you're safe in the moment. Another key step is learning to communicate your fears in a way that invites connection rather than conflict. Let's say your partner has been distant and you're worried they're pulling away. Instead of accusing them, "Why are you ignoring me? Do you not care anymore?" Try expressing how you feel. "I've noticed that we haven't been as connected lately, and it's made me feel a little anxious. Can we talk about it?" This approach not only helps you share your feelings, but also gives the other person a chance to respond with reassurance and care. It's also important to build a stronger sense of self. When your sense of worth isn't tied to whether someone stays or leaves, the fear of abandonment becomes less overwhelming. This might mean spending time reflecting on your values, pursuing hobbies or goals that bring you joy, or working with a therapist to explore what makes you, you. The more secure you feel in yourself, the less you'll feel like your world crumbles when a relationship shifts. Finally, practice self-compassion. It's easy to get caught in a cycle of blaming yourself for your fears or behaviors, but remember, these patterns come from a place of pain, not weakness. When you find yourself spiraling, try to talk to yourself the way you would to a close friend. Remind yourself that it's okay to feel afraid and that you're doing the best you can to navigate those feelings. If you take away one thing from this episode, let it be this: you are not your fear. Yes, the fear of abandonment is a big part of BPD, but it doesn't define you. You are someone who has been hurt, yes, but you are also someone who is capable of healing, growing, and building relationships that feel secure and fulfilling. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Unpacking BPD Podcast. In our next episode, we'll explore splitting, the black and white thinking that makes relationships and self-image feel so unstable. Until then, I'm your host, Sebastian Hayes, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.